It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of the Sod Pod. In the last episode, we covered grassland reseeding, how to identify paddocks for reseeding, and how to go about doing it going forward over the 2 to 3 year plan. Today, we have a special guest. We're delighted to be joined by Dr. David Wall, soil scientist, biochemist, and enterprise leader with Teagasc based in Johnstown Castle, County Wexford. David, some of your key focuses include improving the precision of fertiliser advice, heavily focused on soil health, structure and biology, phosphorus expert, focusing on plant and animal nutrition, and of course organic manure management. But David, in your own words, why not tell our listeners your story? I'd like to hear about your farming background, the farming journey since you joined Teagasc in 2008, and what you see for the future.
My background, I suppose, I'm from a farm here in County Wexford, South County Wexford. We've been a mixed farm, I suppose, grew up with sugar beet and spring barley, as well as a few cows and a few sheep thrown in there. So we were fairly traditional in our mix in terms of Wexford. Over the years, I suppose I always had a graw for the both the animals, but also the soil. And when I started, I came back to Johnstown Castle, came back close to home in 2008, and have been working in the area of soils, nutrients, and I suppose plant nutrition for the last 12 or so years. I suppose over that time, farming has changed a good bit, but also the challenges have increased, I suppose, for farmers community as well. Not just economics, you know, we all know the price pressures, the cost of production, etc. that is going on at the moment. But there's also a lot of challenges there in terms of both production efficiency and also the environment there, and you see it in the media there all the time at the moment, between water quality, greenhouse gases, and now I suppose coming down the tracks is soil biology and biodiversity. So, you know, over the years we're working at Johnstown Castle with colleagues right across Teagasc to deal with these challenges, come up with solutions, and then to get those solutions out to the industry like yourselves as Grassland Agro. Obviously, part and parcel of farming, nutrient advice, nutrient sales, etc. But right across the advisory there in terms of, you know, if it's not for schemes, it'll be for crop production, it'll be for sheep production and all the other enterprises in between.
I think it's important to point out David asked to have a hurling expert added to his introduction, but we had to get rid of that because of we bet you in that quarter final, David. But you've taken it well so far anyways. But David, I suppose when we talk about the challenges we're facing now, we see what's going on in maybe Holland, and you know there's huge protests and basically they ban farming on a large number of areas across Holland, which is crazy. Like in Ireland, we're facing similar challenges, or we should take learnings. Maybe we're not as bad as that, but like, you know, when you talk about water quality and emissions, maybe this stuff wasn't very trendy, but it's getting very real now.
Yeah, John, look at the challenges are out there. We see it elsewhere, as you mentioned, Holland as a good case in point. You know, the farmers were out on the roads protesting over the last week or 10 days. To do with climate change, and I suppose the brakes that are being put on agriculture and production from that standpoint. We're probably not too far away from that here. We're in a good position. We traditionally have been in a good position that we have a very good environment when you compare it relatively to other parts of Europe and other countries. However, we shouldn't sit on our laurels in terms of saying that that's always going to be the case, etc. Like everything, the levels have come down, the levels of scrutiny have gone up, and I suppose farmers and agriculture as an industry are being called out and going to be called out more for any, I suppose, perceived negatives or actual negatives that are happening out there. You know, we look at things like water quality are going to be an issue. Greenhouse gases, it's all over the place. Things like ammonia. And, if we bring it back to straight agriculture at the moment, cost of production, things like nutrient efficiency from a farmer's perspective.
Massively, yeah. And I suppose it's one of those things that while we are very efficient per kilo of output, whether it's lamb or beef or milk solid, it's probably the overall thing we need to do. And like we're trying to be proactive as a company, maybe to protect the derogation, because it's something that you said, David, like it's probably either going to be livestock or nutrients, and for us as a company, either of those are going to impact us significantly. And we probably don't have the opportunity to maybe sow ground in cereals or whatever like they would in mainland Europe. Like, David, I don't think David Corbin now. I don't think there's any tillage in Clare apart from the wild bird cover. Like, so it's simply not practical, I'd say.
No, not at all, John. And sure, there isn't, like, the majority of the west of Ireland, like, you wouldn't have the climate and you wouldn't have the land to do it. And there probably was bits done back years ago, but small little plots maybe for farms and that, but that's not really realistic. But I suppose, David, you were mentioning on the water quality, and that is going to be one of the biggest issues maybe going forward and trying to get that right. But like, even from your own research, before you came back to Teagasc, you were in America and you've done a lot of nitrogen mineralisation and that, and we've been talking about it for a long time, but it's only really now, and you actually mentioned it there earlier on about the Grange Open Day, that farmers are getting very aware, and I feel I can comment on it because I am a beef farmer, and I know from my father's mindset, and my grandfather was a beef farmer, that sustainability and environment is, maybe we're doing it by default just because of low input and that, but it's not something that's at the forefront really. But there was a great take up in Grange.
Yeah, certainly, David. Like, if we think about the Open Day, a lot to see, very successful in terms of what was shown, and I suppose the knowledge imparted to the farmers or whatever that was there. But in the first village, the signpost village, the various components of achieving both, I suppose, nutrient efficiency and ultimately environmental sustainability were laid out there in the 12 steps. And some of that, if you look into components of that, using things like slurries, well, but also going back to basics in terms of the soils. There was a lot of emphasis there in terms of soil structural quality, etc. And as a part of that, we need to have the soil in good quality to work for us. In a year like this, take case in point, lads have trimmed maybe their fertiliser inputs because of price point or because of other pressures this year in terms of economics, and you still want the farm to work for you. Then you have to have the foundations right, you have to have the soil in good health to be able to combat when you pull back from it a little bit with nutrients or whatever else, so that it's going to supply and keep the cattle fed or the crops growing.
David, there's a lot of farmers and students, or farmers' sons or daughters that is listening to this podcast, and you talk about we're not actually that far away from Holland. So what question that I would ask you is, for the farmers listening to the podcast, what simple steps can we take now and implement? Maybe we were implementing them already, but what sort of the key points that we should be implementing that maybe some farmers are not, to, I suppose, slow that process down?
Yeah, I'd hope that we are far enough from what's manifesting itself in Holland at the moment, and we still have time to correct that. So in response to your question, taking stock of what you're doing on the farm is going to be really key at this point. I think a lot of farmers this year, in fairness, have taken stock of what they were doing. They looked at what they did in the spring in particular in terms of fertilisers and slurries, and utilising them to the best of their ability on the farm and maximising the efficiency. So, tailoring the nutrients to what the demand is at different times of the year. Also looking at soil type. Not every soil on the farm is going to be the same. Farmers will know their land better than I or any of us here in the room will. They've been farming it. They know the fields that warm up earliest in the spring and take off and grow, and the other ones that are later. That might be down to simple things like wetness, the drainage class of the field, etc. The drier south-facing fields are going to warm up. They're going to take the sun there in the spring and kick off. And those are the ones to target first. As we move on through the year, other things, there's technologies out there that they can implement. Things like what fertiliser mix are you putting on, and are you thinking about the mix for the different fields according to soil sampling results, etc. And there is many farmers out there that may not have their soil sample results up to spec, and now is really the time, I suppose, to get stuck into that as well.
And I suppose one of the key headlines that we've seen over the last couple of weeks is the increase in lime usage. Like, that's, I suppose, fundamental to any soil nutrient management plan that you carry out in your farm.
Yeah, look at the signs are increasingly positive, I suppose, in terms of going back to basics like pH and lime. Farmers know now that it pays dividends. We've done a bit of analysis there with real farmers, not just on the research, looking at the return on investment there, and you're talking about 7 or 8 to 1 in terms of lime. It's really fundamental. It hasn't changed. Lime is the same. Transport costs might have gone up €1 or €2, but no matter where you are in the country, you'll get lime available to you. Planning seems to be the issue with lime. It's not as easy as filling the spinner or filling the fertiliser spreader and getting it out there. However, if we can overcome that, get a bit grazed out, or come on along after silage time, a load of lime will do about 10 acres, and it should be fairly easy to get set up for a load of lime.
And lime has probably gotten a bad rap, David, down through the years, just maybe because of over application, and just maybe I wouldn't even say
soften the land, sure. Boil it. But saying that now, and I know John will get a great kick out of this, but we put out lime at home last year, down in a bit of lowland. It's actually a floodplain to be very heavy. Carcass, yeah, down by the River Fergus, and absolutely crying out for lime. And myself and the father nearly fell out. Honest to God, no, I was going to pack the bags and head off away from home. You couldn't fall out with Pack Orbit as well, Dave Wall, just for
but anyway,
the soundest man. He's actually a sponsor, the main sponsor of the podcast. Except he doesn't pay us that. Yeah. He's going to get some shock when he gets the bill there.
We were out there 2 weeks ago, changing the cows in an outblock, and we were driving home and met one of the father's friends there, Thomas, and he was on about lime. And these two lads now, lime wouldn't have darkened their door, never thought about it. Their beef farm was very low input, thoughts of spending, €1,000 maybe for a lorry load of lime, But it was like the father was trying to sell him lime, he was trying to persuade him to spread it, and I couldn't get over it, and I thought it was unbelievable, the mindset, what the father could see what lime had done for him, the father was trying to persuade him, go with it now, go now while you have a chance, there's not much grass there. There's never a wrong time for lime, to be fair, David. That's what I'm trying to get at,
No, it's about taking the opportunity, and I think the bottleneck seems to be not having the lime in the yard and not being ready to go when you want to go, and that can be overcome. Just to respond, I suppose, to the anecdotes like softening the sod, etc. There has been too much lime put out in the past. In the 70s and 80s, a lot of the farmers that were around at the time, I suppose, horsed on the lime. They were told to put on the lime at the time, in fairness to them, but maybe over-egged it on some of the we'll say the blacktop ground or some of that. And heavy cattle punched through it, and it did cause problems at the time. However, if we keep it between the ditches, and what I mean there is we put on a little and often approach, the lime will pay dividends, you'll grow more grass, you'll get your PKs, will turn the corner in those fields. And just from the Heavy Soils programme data and talking with the farmers down in that neck of the woods in the southwest, in Kerry, farmers up in Cavan Monaghan as well, what they found is they got better graze outs, the grass was sweeter in terms of following lime, and their P's and K's came back in terms of the soil tests. So there is benefits there.
And from our own research, even on the plots, David, we would have found that even at 3 tonne per acre, 3 tonne of ground lime per acre, there was no impact on compaction, or sorry, not compaction, but softening.
No,
it didn't soften the ground. And the other thing was
nonsense.
It's
only when what I feel it was is when lads had those scutch grass, and it broke down, because you would see on ground like that coming from Comedy, if you break the sod at all, you're done for, like, you know, but it was only that situation, like, where there was a bit of an old straw keeping machinery or cattle up. But sure, what good is it to have that if there's nothing to graze, like, you know? So,
but it had no impact at all, 3 ton, like, so, like, that there's no issue with that. And the other one, David, was the P index, like, the out of those plots, those 3 farms in the southwest, like, you're talking maybe between maybe a third and a half an index on your P, like, that is potential there.
So lime across all the soils in the country, and I think we looked fairly comprehensively at a lot of soils, a lot of different soils up and down the country there, and to a soil we got a bounce in terms of the soil test by putting out lime. So where you bring something up from the mid 5s, pH 5.5, you might jump up to the target, we'll say for grassland there, of 6.3. It doesn't seem like much of a jump, but we turned the corner in terms of P's and K's, and we got about 80 kilograms of nitrogen through mineralisation for free. And that's just showing you there that the soil biology is responding to it as well.
Yeah, I think David Corbett even has nearly made lime the 4th pillar. Now, it doesn't work for the 3-legged stool, but he's nearly added another leg to it, and just
I was never fond of the 3-legged one. 5 or 6 ways in it, you just get wobbly.
But no, it's a huge one, obviously, and there's unparalleled benefits, and it even helps your soil structure as well, because we had all our team down in Johnstown there 3 weeks ago, and it was a brilliant day, and thanks again for having us down. And we spend a lot of time on the structure, you know, and looking at that. But when we do that, and you found the same, and our team are out doing it now as part of the grass vest and salvage sampling for the sustainability program. But any time they come across a bit of compaction and the farmers with them, they're going straight for the subsider and, you know, the pan buster and all these things, like. And you've some great thoughts on that, David.
Yeah, look, you can't blame lads for not sitting on their hands. You know, that's the first thing I think we would have at home as well over the years. You know, you want a bit of horsepower, you want to break it up, you want to solve the problem. However, thinking about the situation, in a tillage situation, that might be one of the options, or maybe in the short term might be your only option that you perceive. In a grassland situation, it's very different. And if I describe it, when you break up the problem, we'll say, with a subsoiler or a pan buster, you're resetting the soil. It's like you're resetting the jigsaw. So basically, you don't have structure there anymore because you've broken it up. And now it's less resilient to whatever you put over it. So if you put in heavy cattle or cows on it, they're going to push the structure back together and maybe cause more problems after it. So it's like a field that's well set. We'll say an old permanent pasture. We'll say with very good ryegrass still in it. It's productive, and you're confident that you can let your cows out on it in spring. If you go pan busting, etc., now you're making it less resilience to more pressure coming on it in the short term. So there's other things that we can do in terms of those fields. Liming is number one, right? What's that going to do for you? It's going to get the plant roots going better. So they're going to break it up naturally. It's also going to get earthworms going for you, and you'll get the benefits both in terms of the earthworm tunnelling and getting the water off the surface there in those compacted spots, but also turning the key there on nitrogen, and you get some nitrogen for free in that situation. Also, things like the way you're working the fields in the spring. So you might be spreading slurry in one direction in a fairly square field. You might decide to mow it and drawing the silage off the other headland, just to give it a rest there, and so you're not always hitting the one spot over and over again during the year. So there is ways of going about it. And
soils are very resilient, David. Like they can take a bit of hardship, but they're very good to recover.
Look, at Mother Nature is great, and soil is natural, you know, and they will rightify themselves given a chance. The problem is, I suppose, in modern productive farming, we're under pressure, the windows are tight, we're going out there maybe, and you know, it mightn't be ideal. I'm not condemning that. Things have to be done at times, but if we look at the situation and try to give the soil a chance, give it a rest an odd time, work the field a different way, put in and give it a chance in terms of a bit of a balance. So when I say a bit of a balance, that we're not always hitting it with the same thing. We have our P's and K's right, we get our lime right, so you have your biology set up there, that it has the nutrients it needs, it has the energy, it'll work in favour for you too.
And even on the compaction side of things, like you have developed a series tool that we're using every day on farm, the grass vest, like, and it's very farmer friendly, and any farmer can turn a sod and assess it themselves and see how their soil is looking, because you commented there about soil quality or the quality of a soil, like, and like, I suppose what is that like, and how would a farmer define a quality soil?
I suppose, look at, in terms of, there's many definitions out there in literature and books and everything else, but for a farmer and from a farmer's perspective, a quality or a healthy soil is a soil that's working for you rather than working against what you're trying to do. And that's the most, I suppose, layman's and practical definition that I can put on it. But if you have a soil well set up to grow the crop that you need to do, be it grass or a crop and that kind of deal, it's going to get rid of the surface water when you want it, but hold on to the water you need it now for the dry part of the summer that we're in at the moment. And it's going to give back the nutrients that you put in it in a timely fashion according to the plant growth. Then you have a soil that's fairly healthy, it's working for you. I suppose things like carbon and a few things like that, we call it soil organic matter, I suppose, as a definition. That's the mortar between the bricks and the soil. And if we don't have enough of that in there, our soil is going to fall over. It's like trying to build a house with bricks alone with no mortar. It's not very resilient. One little bit of an issue in terms of pressure is going to cause the whole thing to fall down on you. And look at getting back to things like the vests. We do need practical tools there. You don't have to go to a lab to do this. It's an assessment there in the field. Your most expensive tool is a spade, and we can all have a spade. And I think digging an old hole along an odd time is never any harm to have a look to see what's going on.
It's something that farmers haven't been doing. Like, you know, I remember whenever I was in ATC in Cavan Monaghan, and the whole concept of taking the spade out and the farmer with you, they didn't see this being done before, you know, and they probably were doing it in years gone by, but they just weren't passing any heat to what they were doing. But once they seen, and we talked them through the grass vest and how good it was, and then maybe compared to a bit that was compact, say at the Gap or whatever like that, they nearly take it to the next field and the field after, and another field that there was something wrong with.
Front lawn as well, the whole lot.
Front lawn. Yeah, but you know, it's changing that mindset, because you know, there was a lot of interaction at the grass fest at the Grange Open Day as well, I believe. So it's changed that mindset. But look at, I suppose the price of fertiliser and the price of nutrients this year has probably got farmers to sort of rethink and have a look at what their management practice was and how it's going to change going forward. Policy is going to change it, but I suppose we have to nearly be ahead of the policy. One of the things that I'd asked David you to comment on is that this year a lot of farmers, whenever they were I suppose buying their nutrients this year, though maybe some farmers was buying the same as every other year, other farmers was buying wee bit less P's and K's. I suppose, what impact does that have this year, or does it have an impact this year? I know soil type will dictate that to a certain extent, but maybe how important is it next year if prices remain the same? What impact will it have on farms?
Look, it's a good point and a good question. It's something that I'd be concerned about, I suppose, given what we've looked at in research and also looked at across commercial farms there. There's no free lunch here in terms of, if you leave something out, at some point in the future, you're going to have a want for it, or the grass or the crop that you're trying to grow is going to have a want for it. So in terms of, look, this year has been a funny old year. Lads might have only got what they could get, in fairness. The slurry has been used better, I will say, across farms, and probably that has helped in some fields. But just dealing with your question specifically, if there was P's or K's left out on a field, that will probably be okay for this year, because things didn't really bite till we got into the mid-spring and onwards. As soils heat up, they begin to give back what was already stored there from previous years. However, next spring I would be concerned about it, because when we mine what's in there, or when we remove what's in there in the crops this year, be it big silage crops, be it tillage crops, or even with offtakes with grazing, that buffer now is not there in the soil for next spring when soil is cold and damp. I'm talking about March into April there, when we start getting into peak growth. Turnout has happened on dairy farms, and turnout will be happening, and demand will be going up on beef and sheep farms. And at that point, things might begin to bite. So we do need to think about that and put in a strategy on farms for next year for getting that right.
Well, I think this is a controversial opinion now, but we have used slurry way better this year. But like you said, we prioritised a lot of it to our grazing ground. That would potentially have been, maybe we would have wasted the nitrogen in previous years. We would have gone out after the first cut and horsed it out, just to get rid of it. But we probably need to be conscious of that in relation to the potash, especially going into the back end. That's one point of the story, because we found that from doing the silage cutting ways, that the yields were actually comparable to what they were last year. Probably anecdotal, you'd hear it was good crops of silage, maybe less nitrogen, but something we probably need to keep an eye into the back end, probably, Dave. Would you agree? Or
yeah, look at John, it is a key point. We have to think as slurry nutrients, as recycled nutrients. They're not new nutrients in across the farm gate, right? So while we should use the resources that we have on farm better, and farmers have this year, which is really positive. It leaves you less exposed to market forces and other forces. However, we can't rely on that totally for our nutrients. If we're carting nutrients out the gate in terms of milk, meat, grain, or silage, we'll say silage and hay, even straw crops coming off tillage ground, we have to bring those nutrients back in. If not, we're going to end up, after some time, we'll get away with it for a year, maybe even 2 on a well-built-up farm to start off with. But when we come back and soil sample, the proof will be in the pudding. They'll begin to drop off. And K, you mentioned K, potash. Potash is the one that'll drop like a lead balloon. Yeah,
the slurry is effective nearly the overdraft, because we're recycling around the farm. There's very few farms maybe bringing in, apart from the bit of straw, I'm talking about maybe intensive dairy farms. They're not bringing in any more slurry anyways.
No, and look at that's a good analogy. It is the overdraft, and farmers out there know if you stay in the overdraft for too long, it'll leave you in a whole world of hurt.
David, you have a big event coming up at the end of August. The theme is grass, soils and technologies. Do you want to just give a few, I suppose, key points on what you'll be covering? I know we probably covered some of the topics today, but do you want to give a bit of in-depth?
Yeah, so it's, with the last couple of years, it's been 3 or 4 years since we've had an open day there in Johnstown Castle. It's in the southeast, I suppose. So the farmers from this region in the southeast will be front and centre at it, but would welcome farmers from further afield. I suppose the whole focus of the open day is about sustainable farms for the future. A lot of what we've talked about here today is going to be featured at it. We have the multi-species swards trial and the clover work that's been going on there. It's new, I suppose. Lads might come and see for themselves what's going on in terms of that. Other things that will be discussed there is much of the stuff in terms of putting the nutrient package together in the soil. Things like soil health, things like, I suppose, the winter milk and dairy calf to beef work that's going on in Johnstown in terms of that agronomy and what's new in terms of that. And we'll have a big emphasis there at the end in terms of technologies for reducing our reliance, I suppose, on chemical fertiliser. So that's where the soil health stuff comes in, the lime stuff comes in, etc. So look, we'd welcome people from right across the country to come down. It's the sunny southeast. It'll be still sunny on the 30th of August down there. Bring the family. We have the castle and gardens there, so it can become a family day out, something for the farmer in the family and something for the rest of the family too.
Yeah, there should be lots of practical stuff as well. When we were in with David, the talk that Aidan gave us was brilliant on the multi-species and that trial. So Question for you in relation to soil biology. We've kind of covered the chemical, the physical, and the biology. You have a lot of experience on that, obviously, from your PhD and work that's ongoing. But it ties in a lot to the biodiversity, and a lot of the biodiversity is in the soil. But in relation to that biology, do you have a figure of, if we get that right, how much nitrogen could we mineralise and recycle in a year? Do you know? Like, what's the top figure that we should be aiming for? Like, I know we're not there at the moment, but what could we get to?
Look, at soil biology, it's unseen other than the earthworm, right? The rest of it is unseen. But in a teaspoon of soil, we have billions of soil biology. And they're really the engine of the soil. They're turning over the organic nutrients in the slurries that we're putting in. They're helping the plant sequester the nutrients or get it into the plant root. So getting to your question there, in terms of nitrogen alone, be it one nutrient that they're front and centre in, we've looked across soils in the country, and on the sandiest and the lightest soils we were getting as low as 60-70 kilograms. I say low, that's a lot of nitrogen if you're able to get it back, all the way up to 300 and 350 kilograms. Now, if we think about 350 kilograms, that's way more than you're putting on with your fertiliser spreader.
Exactly, yeah.
So, look, it is a key, and the way I think about it, and farmers often ask me, how do we manage this soil biology? If you manage the habitat, and when I say the habitat, the conditions in the soil for that soil biology, if you feed them well, build it, feed them, and they'll come, and they'll work for you for free.
And is it fair to say, David, that the earthworm you said is the seen, and there is the major part is the unseen? Is it fair to say if the earthworm is there, the rest of them are working?
By and large, David, yeah. If the earthworm is a key indicator, so if we can see the earthworm and the earthworm is fairly happy and there's young, they're producing and they're young, just without digressing too much, we did a trial there looking at dung pats and what was happening in a field under the dungs in the field, and where you have a well set up soil that an earthworm can travel in, they'll move to the dung pat. You dig up under the dung pat, they're all there. The next time the field is grazed, they'll move to the next one. So that's the food, the carbon that they're after. So if we have a good soil fertility, we're putting in the nutrients, we have the balance, the P's, the K's, the lime. So acid, we don't want acid. We don't like acid ourselves. It'll burn us. It'll burn up the plant roots and burn the earthworm as well. So build it and they'll come.
A very interesting figure I heard you reference before was how many earthworms are actually in the ground, and it's kind of related to stocking rate.
Yeah, so in that same study that I'm referenced there, we looked at the earthworms and the earthworm population in the soil, and basically they're akin to whatever the stocking rate is on the farm, which is not surprising, because the stocking rate is basically the big four-legged digester that's producing the food for the earthworm. So those dung pats, etc., if there's no more dung pats, you're putting back on your slurries, you're keeping the habitat right, they'll come and feed and they'll produce a population to match it.
I think one of what we basically talked about, and this is maybe off the wall or whatever, but we're really now heading into a sort of a conventional regenerative agriculture. There's no probably definition of regenerative agriculture, but the key principle of it is to restore our soils and across all the three functions, and that's what we need to get into, maybe our psyche of a relatively high stock farm, but trying to get back to a good tillage farm or whatever on a plough based system, trying to get back into that, trying to get our soils back to where they were maybe in years gone by.
Yeah, look, it's a good point, John. Regenerative agriculture can be many things to different peoples. There's all kinds of definitions, etc. But ultimately, if we mind the soil, you'll have productive, profitable and sustainable agriculture. And that's the long and the short of it. And, the principles can be applied on an organic farm, a lowly stocked beef and sheep farm, or a highly stocked dairy farm. There's still the same principles can be applied in different aspects in different ways.
That's great, David. Thanks for a real passionate, informative discussion there. Just that event you talked about, the 30th of August, 2022, Teagasc, Johnstown Castle. technologies for farms of the future. That looks like a really big event, and we're all looking forward to that. So as I say, the 30th of August. Some of my takeaway points: tailoring the nutrient inputs to match the nutrient outputs throughout the year. Ensure your soil sample results are up to date. Get back to basics of pH and lime, and with lime, little and often is best. A return on investment, 6 or 7 to 1. The Grass Vest, simple practical test. All you need is a spade. You can also download the easy to follow Grassland Agro Grass Vest mobile app on Android and Apple. Mind yourself out there. Farm smart, farm safe. Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.